Welcome to Jackie's Craft Table. Hi everyone, thanks for joining me. I hope you're all having a wonderful day. In this video, I'm creating 10 cards with Simon Says Stamps March card kit. It's called Lucky Rainbow. I'll start out by showing you the contents of this card kit. First, it comes with this big sticker sheet. And this is from Doodlebug. All of the images are so cute. These were really fun to decorate my cards with, and I used a lot of them on the insides of my cards. Okay, let me pull out the rest of the stuff here. I'll start out with the Lucky Charms embellishments from Buttons Galore. And this is a hybrid mini ink cube, and it's called Lucky. Of course, you get a little lollipop. And then you get 3 envelopes, 2 white and 1 golden metallic. The pattern paper is single-sided, and it's all about rainbows. It includes lots of different colors of these rainbows. I have a lot left over, and I'm going to use them for my summer-themed cards, because it kind of looks like ocean waves or fish scales. This stamp set is called Woolly Lucky. The 6x8 stamp set is called Amazing. It was really fun playing with all of these patterned circle images. And the sentiments were really big and substantial, and I liked that. Here is the example sheet with all of their beautiful card ideas. And then for the cardstock, the colors are Sunshine, Orange Peel, and this one's Dull Pink, and a piece of white, Nina Solar White, and then you get Blue Violet and Green Apple. My favorite color from this card kit was the Sunshine card stick. I think I used up every single scrap of that. Now onto my first card. I'm using a piece of the Nina Solar White cardstock and one of the circle stamps. This one just looked like a flower to me, so I'm going to turn this stamp image into some flowers on the front of this card. I already stamped one out and used a circle die cut to cut it out, and you'll see it right there in the middle. And then I'm going to stamp 2 of them down flat onto this piece of cardstock. And I'm using some VersaFine Onyx black ink for this. I pulled out a pencil so that I could draw in some leaves for these flowers. I'm just lightly sketching those in. I placed my sentiment at the top just to see where I wanted that to go. I didn't want to cover that up with my leaves. I'm going over my lines with a Copic multi-liner pen. That was just quick and easy to do. The center flower I am going to prop up with some foam squares. I'm going to put that on my panel now because I'm going to cut this card on a diagonal, just using some scissors, and I'm going to cut around the leaves and the flowers. And then for the top of the card, I'm going to use some of the Dull Pink cardstock. I'm heat embossing my sentiments on this. I'm using some Simon Says Stamp clear embossing ink. My usual thing is to emboss them up at least twice. And then I can pour over the white embossing powder, and I'm just using a piece of copy paper to catch the rest of that. Once that has melted, it turns a really bright white. It looks so pretty against this pink cardstock. I pulled out a few Copic markers to color in these flowers. I don't think I allowed the flowers on the sides to dry long enough because the ink does start smudging on those, but it didn't look too bad, and I just wanted to keep going on this card. I had already put a lot of work into it. For the center flower, I picked out Copic markers that kind of matched the cardstock, and then the ones on the sides I wanted to be a lighter pink. I'm using 2 different Copic markers to color in the leaves. And now I can attach that to my pink card panel. I'm just going to put that down flat with some dot liner. And now I can attach that to a white card base. And that finishes my first card. I think that turned out kind of cute. I think that is my favorite stamp from that whole set. I love that rose-looking stamp. On to card number 2. I'm going to use some of the pattern paper from this kit. And this one was really fun and really quick to put together. I stamped out my sentiment already, and it's bold enough to be able to stamp on this cardstock. Not that the cardstock's very loud. And now I'm going to use the Lucky ink and stamp circles all over this panel. This mini ink cube is very juicy, so I was trying to be careful not to press down too hard on the ink pad. And I'm just doing all the different sizes of the circles. I love that they have larger ones and then really teeny tiny ones. And it's fun just to do some mindless stamping, and I really liked the results. I'm also going to add some black ink. I think it just pulls in the sentiment, the black ink from the sentiment. I'm going to use some more VersaFine Onyx black ink for this. I'm using some fun foam to put behind this, just to give it some dimension. And here I am using a piece of the Sunshine cardstock to mat this. For the inside, I'm going to use another scrap of the pattern paper and some of the cute stickers. Stickers really make decorating the insides of your cards fast and fun. I'm using more dot liner to attach this panel to a white card base. And then I had to pull out some of the sequins from Buttons Galore. I really loved this variety pack. And I'm just going to adhere those down diagonally across the front of my card. And that finishes off card number 2. There's another peek at the inside. Okay, card number 3 is all about pattern paper and stickers. I'm using some score tape on the back of this piece of fun foam. And I'm going to prop up a piece of the Neenah Solar White cardstock, and I die cut that with a Wonky Stitch die. I really loved this piece of rainbow pattern paper. It only included one, but I really liked it. I'm using the sticker that says happy, and I really wanted this to be a birthday card, and so I'm kind of cheating here. I'm using a die from my own stash that says birthday. I picked up a little die cutting machine that can just sit on your desk. When these first came out on the market, I didn't think that they were necessary, but I really love having it right on my desk. I don't have to get up and walk around my table and go to my big die cutting machine because that's a lot of work. And I'm kind of lazy, as you can tell. So having that right on my desk and just being able to cut out little dies is really helpful. I'm really enjoying that tool. I'm gluing down this die cut at the bottom of my card. And of course, I'm using another piece of that Sunshine cardstock, and it matched well with the happy sticker. I chose to use a unicorn and a cute rainbow. And I thought I'd save this card for my daughter for her birthday because she loves unicorns and rainbows. And then I can just attach that to a white card base. I needed more sparkle, of course, to be a rainbow unicorn card. So I added a few more embellishments and some Wink of Stella over the word birthday. And that card is complete. And I did use a piece of the pattern paper and some more stickers on the inside. On my next card, I'm going to use more of the circle stamps, and I'm going to turn them into flowers again. I'm arranging them on a piece of cardstock. I was going to use the white cardstock, but then I changed my mind and pull out a piece of the blue-violet, the purple-looking cardstock. and I swap that out. And I'm going to be using some white unicorn pigment ink to stamp these down. I'm going to be heat embossing them, but before I do that, I want to be able to color in my images with some colored pencils. And colored pencils on dark cardstocks is a really fun technique to do. It really shows up bright and nice. So I just stamp them up twice just to get kind of an impression, because I am, like I said, going to go back over it with some white embossing powder. And I have a few Caran d'Ache. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly. I just picked out a few from the store because I wanted to try them. I was curious about them. So I have a pink and I have a red. And then the rest I'm using my Polychromos pencils. I think they look so striking on this purple paper. Once my coloring is done, I'm going to ink them up with some clear embossing ink. And I just left them on the door of my Mini Misti so that I could do this. A stamp positioning tool is nice to have to do techniques like this. And now I can pour over my white embossing powder and melt that with my heat tool. And as always, I heat it up for a minute before I bring it to the paper. This white embossing powder is really nice. I've had it for about 3 years now, and I can kind of see a dent in the bottle now, but it sure lasts a long time. It's Hero Art's white embossing powder, and I love how bright it gets once it's melted. And now I'm going to draw in some stems for my flowers, and I'm going to use a white gel pen for this. I just want the stems to look kind of wonky and wiry. And some little leaves. I'm going to mat this cardstock with a piece of the green apple cardstock. I love the purple and the green together. And then I'm going to adhere it down to another white card base. I went ahead and colored in the leaves on my flowers green. And I'm adding a few white Nouveau drops around this panel just to brighten it up a little bit more. I really like how this one turned out. It was fast and fun to do. The inside, I just stamped a few more of the circle dies and stamped another sentiment. And now for the Woolly Lucky stamp set. I colored in this darling little llama with some colored pencils, and I did that off camera just for the sake of time. I stamped out the largest of the sentiments from this set that says, "Woolly Lucky to know you." I'm using more pattern paper and sunshine cardstock. And then I'm going to prop him up behind this circle die cut. I put a piece of foam tape behind his head so it would match the height of the circle die cut. And now for some more of the sequins. And I kept them in this little container the whole time I was doing this card kit. And that wasn't a very good idea. I can't tell you how many times I bumped it over and had sequins scattered all over my desk. I'm going to be finding these sequins for months to come, I'm afraid. But it is handy once you're trying to select which ones to use on your card panels. I needed a little more Wink of Stella on his hat and on the little blanket on his back. And that completes the card once I attach it to another white card base. The card base was a little long, so I end up trimming that down a little bit. And I think that llama from that stamp set is so darling. He was really fun to color in. And of course I used some more scrap paper and stickers for the inside. I'm going to use this llama stamp set again for this card. And I'm stamping him onto a piece of the Neenah Solar white cardstock. And I pulled out a bunch of Copic markers to color him in. I waited a little bit for the ink to dry, and I'm going to make a rainbow scene behind this llama. I'll show you the coloring on this card. I selected a bunch of Copic markers that were really, really pale because I didn't want the rainbow that I'm going to draw in behind this llama to be too bright and overtake the card. So I just selected really pale Copic markers in rainbow colors. I'm drawing in kind of an Irish landscape behind him. So this is some Irish heather around his legs. Then the top of the card I colored in with a blue Copic marker and then a little more green under the rainbow. To color in the llama, I chose some light earth tone shades. I'm using the darker ones just to put down some shadows, give him a little dimension. And then I have to color in his hat green again for St. Patrick's Day and his little blanket. To make the blanket and his buckle look golden, I used a really pale yellow Copic and some darker earth tone Copics to make that look shiny and gold. Then a little rose color for his cheeks. I put that back into my Mini Misty to crisp up the lines. It really makes a big difference, I think. I'm using a wonky stitch die rectangle to cut out this panel. And I'm going to attach that to a piece of dark green cardstock from my own stash. And I'm going to use another piece of fun foam so I can prop up this panel. This is just some score tape. And I use my craft pick to pull off the release paper. I'm terrible at pulling off released paper. It takes me ages, but the craft pick does really help. Even then, I seem to have difficulties. And then I'm going to center that on a white card base. And I cut it down so that the white of the card base would show from behind it. I left the sentiment for last because I wasn't sure what I wanted to do with that. So I'm going to put that in my Mini Misty, and I had to take out the foam piece because this was quite a thick card. And I'm just stamping the sentiment that says, "Wishing you a llama luck." And it's such a little sentiment that I thought it would look good at the top there. I'm adding a little bit of Wink of Stella to the purple heather and his hat, and to his blanket and tie, bow tie. You gotta love a llama in a bow tie. Like, so cute. I also added 3 little sequins at the top there. And then I went ahead and decorated the inside. It's very simply done with a strip of the green apple cardstock and some more stickers. For my next card, I'm going to use the circle stamps again. I just can't get enough of these. They're so much fun to play with. I'm stamping them up with some clear embossing ink. And it's kind of hard to see where I'm stamping, so that's kind of why I left that stamp sitting there on the block, so I didn't stamp over it with another stamp. And then this is a piece of Bristol Smooth cardstock that I'm stamping them onto. Once I pour over the white embossing powder, they're a little easier to see. And I stamped them out with a lot of space around them so that I could die cut them with some circle dies. Once the powder melts, you can see them even a little bit better still. I chose to use the Bristol Smooth cardstock so that I could do some Distress Oxide blending over these. This is going to be another rainbow card, so I chose my Distress Oxides in rainbow colors. And then make sure that you buff off the excess Distress Oxide off of your embossing powder. Otherwise it looks kind of dull. This was a fun process to do, very quick and easy. I pulled out all my circle dies so that I could fit them to the various flowers. It's a very eclectic collection. Sometime I'd like to get a set of nesting circle dies without faux stitching or anything else. But I think these turn out really cute. I wanted them to be different sizes. I'm using my craft pick to pop out all of the extra bits from these die cuts. Looks like confetti on my mat there. It's very pretty. I'm going to use a piece of the orange peel cardstock. I want to heat emboss my sentiment on this cardstock. So I'm using some more clear embossing powder. The white looks very nice on this bright orange cardstock as well. I use white embossing powder more than any other color, I think. I'm going to use a square die to cut out my sentiment once it's melted. And of course I have to use my little mini die cutting machine. I do wish that they were just a tad bigger. The opening's only like 2.5 inches. So I have to cut down this cardstock a little bit to fit, but it's better than getting up, right? And now I can just run it through my little machine. So lightweight and nice. And now to assemble this card. I'm adhering my orange peel cardstock onto a white card base, and I'm propping up my sentiment with a little bit of foam tape. Now some of the flowers I'm going to adhere down flat onto the card, and some I'm going to use some more foam tape behind them. Actually, these are foam squares that I'm using. I end up pulling off some of the foam squares because at this point I wanted all of them propped up, but they pulled off easily enough. And then I can just arrange them around my sentiment. And I'm not worrying about going in rainbow order. And then once I got the placement, I'm going to start attaching them. It did take me a while to figure out where I wanted them to go, so I had to speed this up super fast. And that finishes off my card. On the inside, I used another leftover die cut and glued that down with a little bit of Distress Oxide ink behind it. On my next card, I'm going to make a shaker card, and I'm using a cute little tag die that I have in my stash, and I want to partial die cut this. Once that's cut out, I'm going to gently peel off the purple tape, and then I'm going to cut out my little window. I'm using a pencil to draw in a line of where I want to cut it. I guess I could have used a penknife to cut the whole thing out, but it was a process. I wasn't sure where I was going with this card at the time. It's always fun to see where it takes you. You never know what it's going to turn out to look like. So there's my little window, and I'm using some dot liner on the inside of this panel so that I can adhere my acetate. And now I can double up my foam tape to put around this shaker card window. I put a double layer of foam tape behind the whole panel. And I'm attaching a piece of the Sunshine cardstock to a white card base. And now I can pull off my release paper and get it ready to attach. I put some of the sequins right on the yellow panel. And then I just pressed the green panel on top. I'm using a little twine from my stash to put on this darker green tag. I always like to use a glue dot behind my twine just to keep it in place. I'm going to use the Happy St. Patrick's Day sentiment on the bottom right corner. This is just a cute little sentiment, and I thought it went well there. And now I can adhere my tag to put everything together. I'm using this cute little girl sticker, as well as a few of the hearts. I'm adhering the tag onto my panel with some dot liner. So it ends up looking like two tags on the front of this card, one a shaker and one a cute sticker tag. And the inside I just put the pot of gold, and that finishes off this card. For a change on my next card, I'm going to do heat embossing again, but this time I'm going to use gold embossing powder. I'm using two sentiments for this card. The first one says, "Everyone agreed." And this is antique gold embossing powder from Simon Says Stamp. It's my favorite gold. I'm going to melt that first before I stamp out my next sentiment underneath. I just love how this embossing powder catches the light and sparkles. The sentiment I'm stamping underneath says, "You're fantastic, amazing, and incredible." I just love this sentiment. It's so fun. And then I'm going to use some more gold on that. I was really inspired by one of the cards on the example sheet, and it looks like they used one of the stamps as a sunflower. So I can't take credit for this idea, but I'm going to stamp this out with some wild honey distress oxide. I'm going to stamp some flowers around this panel. And then for the center of this flower, I'm using Vintage Photo on this little stamp that looks like a bunch of seeds. Making sure to snug that up in the corner always, so I don't miss stamp. I think that looks so pretty. So I stamped that a few times across this panel. I didn't clean off my stamps in between, so I had to make sure to put them down right where I wanted them so the ink didn't smudge. So if you want to play around a little bit with the placement of your stamps, then definitely clean them in between stamping. But as you can see, I just kind of dropped it down into place. There, and that completes the stamping of the sunflowers. I had to use the little dots again, and I'm using some carved pumpkin for that to match the orange cardstock that I'm using behind this panel. This one's called Orange Peel, I believe. And then for the inside, I'm going to stamp a few of the sunflowers again. I end up stamping more than what I'm showing here, but I'll show you that at the end. And now to die cut out my sentiment from this panel. I used a T-ruler just to tape that on straight. I'm carefully pulling off the purple tape, and I'm going to mat this sentiment panel with some orange peel cardstock. So I'm cutting that down so you can just barely see the orange behind this panel. Then I'm gluing that down flat with some dot liner. And then behind the orange peel cardstock, I am going to use some more fun foam. I already adhered my orange peel cardstock to my card base, and I'm attaching the frame down flat onto the orange peel cardstock. And then I realized that I put the frame on wrong. And so I gently peel off the frame and turn that around so that it matches up with the flowers that I stamped on this smaller panel. And here's a look at the inside. I just love the little dots I stamped around the sunflowers. I thought it added a lot of interest to this card. We're up to the very last card now. I'm using a piece of blue violet cardstock, and I'm going to, once again, heat emboss my sentiment on this panel. And it says, "Have I told you lately that you're amazing?" I just love all the sentiments from this stamp set. And I didn't even use all of them yet, so I guess I'll have to make some more cards with them. I'm going to melt this embossing powder. And then, as you see, I have a little banner die to the left. And I'm going to use that to cut out my sentiment. So my color scheme for this card includes purples and grays and just a little bit of yellow. And I'm using various inks, trying to match the purple cardstock to stamp up some more of these circles. I don't do any coloring at all on this card, just a lot of fun stamping. This purple ink I'm using is from MFT, and it's called Periwinkle. And the gray is called London Fog, and it's a Memento Teardrop ink. I also use a Memento ink called Dandelion for my yellow here in a minute. I put my banner sentiments in place just to see where I needed to stamp some more. Nothing's adhered down yet. And then I also decide to come in with Grape Jelly Memento ink, just to match the dark purple of this blue-violet cardstock. Watching this now, I probably just should have used my acrylic block to stamp all of these out. But it is nice to use a stamp positioner just so you can restamp them if you need to darken the color. Now I can glue everything down, starting with my pattern paper, and then my banner strip, and I'm going to use some foam tape behind that. Just cutting out some triangles to fit in place here. Before I adhere down my sentiment, I'm using my corner chomper to round the edges and soften the card's effect a little bit. And now I can peel off the release paper and put that in place. I decide that the sentiment needs a bit more to it, so I come in with some Nuvo drops in the color gray and put a few around my sentiment. I'm just kind of tapping that to flatten out the drops. I'm going to use another piece of the purple paper to mat this, and you can only see it peeking out through the corners, but I really liked that effect. I thought it looked cute. And now I can adhere it to my card base. I'm being very careful because my Nuvo drops are still wet. And that completes card number 10. I hope these card designs have given you some inspiration, and I hope that you get a chance to sit down and create something fabulous today. As always, my friends, thanks so much for watching. Bye!